Hello everyone. How's everybody doing? Happy Monday. My name is Francisco Cantu. It is the first Monday of the month of December. The month has absolutely flown by, but I am happy to be with you all today, parents, to talk to you once again about the college application journey, about the road towards sending your students to college. I am happy to have, like I do every Monday, another live stream session. As you should know by now, I have live stream sessions every Monday at 3 p.m. on our YouTube and Facebook channels. And then on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. on our Instagram and TikTok channels. That's where I come on live and I do these presentations like I'm going to do today. If you are wondering what I will be talking about today, well, today I will be talking about the different types of high schools. Now, as you know, if you have joined many times before, and if this is your first time, let me explain to you the logistics behind this live streams, why we do this, and the way that the next 45 minutes are going to play out. And then I'm going to talk to you all about best college aid. So pretty much I do these live streams. I come on here again, Mondays and Tuesdays at 3 p.m. And I do these presentations on things that are topically relevant. So things that are related to whatever is going on in the world of college admissions today. So for example, before October, I did a live stream on CSS Profile versus the FAFSA. During the middle of October, I was doing live streams on early action. Last week, we talked about, the regular decision applications. And we try to keep the topic of these live streams as relevant to whatever is going on in the world of college admissions. Today, right now, December 5th, since we have already talked about early action, early decision, we decided to take a step back and do a presentation that is more towards, the parents of younger students who might be starting high school or who might be in their second year of high school, or parents of middle school students who are wondering what type of school would be best for them and their students on their road to college. What establishment, what private, public, charter, magnet high school is going to position their students in such a way that they will be best set up for the road to college. So in today's presentation, again, the different types of high schools, I'm going to break down all the different types of high schools. And as I do at the end of every live stream, whether again, it's on Facebook or YouTube, or the ones that I do tomorrow on Instagram and TikTok, I always finish up the hour with a Q&A session. So if you are watching us on either YouTube and Facebook, you can use the comment section like Jenna Dean is doing right now, saying, "Hello, Francisco." Hello, Jenna. Happy to have you here again. Just like Jenna, any of you can use the chat features on both Facebook and YouTube to comment your questions. You might be a parent of a sophomore in high school or the parent of a middle schooler. So whatever the case may be, I want to hear from you. Why? Because at the end of this presentation, I'm going to scroll back up the chat and I'm going to be answering whatever questions you have about the road to college. So again, if you just joined, the way that the next 45 minutes are going to play out, I'm going to do the presentation on the different types of high schools and how you can choose whichever one is best for your kid and for your student, what will enable them to be best positioned to apply to college. And then after that is up, after I'm done with that presentation, I will be sharing comments like I'm doing right now with Jenna Dean's comment, and I will be answering questions that either you asked right now live or that we have gotten in the past, okay? So that is the way that the next 45 minutes are going to play out. And before I get started, again, I already reminded you all that the live streams on Mondays are on YouTube and Facebook, as you're watching right now at 3 p.m. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I'll be live on Instagram and TikTok, okay? Next set of reminders is if you have not already done so and you want to see our different types of TikToks or Instagram posts, because we use the different types of media that we can create on each platform. So on Instagram, we post carousels and pictures of scholarships that are coming up. On TikTok, we do informational content on like a faster paced, quicker format. On YouTube and Facebook, we do more of like the 6-7 minute videos explaining certain topics. So if you want to know a little bit about everything, or if you're more involved in one platform over the other, let's say right now you're watching us on Facebook, but you're a big avid YouTube watcher, then it might be in your best interest to go ahead and give us a follow on YouTube. And again, it's very easy across the board. The handle is at Best College Aid USA. And once again, I want to remind you that if you are watching us and you are a parent or a student or whoever you are, and you have a question about anything related to the college admissions process, you can use the chat feature like Daniel Schrader is using right now, saying hello. Hello, Daniel. Happy to have you here again. Thank you so much for joining. And as you can see, we have the ability to share where you are, what your questions are on the screen. And then based on that, that can inform the dialogue and the things that I explain. Will go from your questions on the comment section. And additionally, I have David from the Best College Aid account also present on the chat. As you can see, I'm sharing his comment right now on the screen. It says, hello guys, let us know where you are joining from. Yeah, so that is David, who is helping me monitor the chat. And Laura, who is also helping me monitor the chat, and that's on Facebook, saying, hello everyone, let us know where you're joining from. Why? So that, we can get a conversation started and I can, get an idea as to where I should be sort of putting the examples from. Like, so if I'm going to be talking about state scholarships, and I know that most of our viewers are watching from Florida, maybe I can talk about Bright Futures, or New York, I can talk about the New York Tuition Assistance Program. So it always helps to make these live stream presentations more dynamic if I know who my audience is, and I can make examples that best serve you throughout the next 45 minutes, okay? So yeah, do let us know where you're watching from. I will come back to the chat throughout the presentation to answer questions. But without further ado, let me go ahead and get started, or share with you all who joined a little bit late what I will be talking about today in the presentation. And that is different types of high schools. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the difference between public, private, charter, and magnet high schools, and what might be best for your specific situation. Now, if you are a parent of a senior or a junior in high school, and this topic might not necessarily be super applicable to you, that's okay, because we know that not everyone who is watching these presentations will, be getting information that is relevant to their specific stage of the process. So as a way to make sure that everyone joining gets some value, I do have, and we have prepared a presentation for you all that is more of a step back, and it covers the whole college admissions process from beginning to end. And it is a presentation, a free presentation on the 6 strategies to go to college with scholarships. And if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm sharing my screen right now. Let's say that you're watching us right now, and this is the YouTube video. As you can see, that's me. It's a little meta. I'm sharing a screen of my of my YouTube page. But if you scroll down to the video description and you click on register to watch our free training, and you click on this link, you will be redirected to a page for the free presentation on the 6 steps to go to college with scholarships. It's a free training. You just put your name, last name, and your email address, and you will be good to go. You'll watch that, and that might be more relevant to your situation. Again, that's on top of the next 45 minutes of value that I will be giving you all, okay? But I just wanted to make sure that you knew of this resource that's available to you all if you click on the video description. All right, cool. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on today's presentation on the different types of high schools. All right, so the first type of high school that I will be explaining today, or that I will be, getting started with today, is public high schools. Okay, and why? Because that is the most common high school that people are familiar with. The main components of such institutions is that they are operated by their district. You have your local district, or it can be operated at the state level. But as the name suggests, yeah, they're publicly owned. They don't have any cost of attendance. And usually the national average for the student to school counselor ratio is 424 to 1. So for every 424 students, there is one college counselor on average, at the national average, for high school students who are seeking, guidance from their free college counselor that is available at the high school. Now, what this does is there is a lot of value that these free high school counselors can provide your student, which is great because, they're as accessible as they can be, given that they're serving so many students. But the problem here is that, unfortunately, there's a lack of resources in some cases for these high school counselors to to satisfy the needs of every single one of those students, to not fault of their own, but rather there's just a funding problem or a ratio problem that unfortunately high school counselors have to deal with. And although there are some great, wonderful high schools that have all the best counselors, unfortunately, because there's so many students, sometimes they can get overwhelmed. But that is the national average. Again, 424 students for one counselor, the average. Another characteristic of public high schools is that they have open enrollment. Usually this has to do with zoning and what your specific address corresponds to the high school. And if you fall under that umbrella of geographic location, you are open to enroll. The next description or component is that not in every case, but in many cases, these public high schools have older facilities, which again, no fault of their own. It just tends to happen that private institutions sometimes are newer, or they have some sort of private funding to get, restored or to get maintenance that sometimes public high schools do not have the ability to share or to enjoy. And then a final component of public high schools is that they tend to have larger class sizes. I've heard down here in South Florida, I've heard of public high schools that have, around 800 students per grade, all the way up to 2,000 students per grade. I think the largest school in the Broward County District, which is what we're most familiar with down here in South Florida, is Cypress Bay High School that has, if I remember correctly, well over 1,000 students per class. I could be wrong. If you want to let me know in the chat, if you are a parent of a public high school student and you want to let me know how many students are there in your student's class, that would be great to join the discussion or to get the ball rolling. But yeah, all in all, those are the main characteristics that I wanted to share about a public high school. Now, before I go any further with this topic, there is a lot of misconceptions that I want to address right off the bat. A lot of people say, oh, private high schools are always better than public high schools, or public high schools don't have necessarily as good of teachers or resources. That's not necessarily the case. There are some wonderful, great public high schools that have, a great tradition of having above a certain grade, by their county, because they have great professors, because they have great facilities, because they're really well ran by the administration. So yeah, I think as I go on with this presentation, it's going to be very important to note that you cannot discriminate right off the bat whether or not a school is good or bad based on any of the titles that I will be sharing throughout the presentation of public, magnet, charter, or private school. Okay, that's just something that I want to get right off the bat, because as we go along and I'm going to be sharing characteristics that are kind of like very matter of fact, I don't want those to cloud your judgment as a parent as to, oh, then all public schools are like this or all private schools are like that. A lot of these statistics are based on averages, and there are very much many exceptions to any and all of the characteristics that I'm going to be continuing to talk about. All right. But yeah, I feel like I don't have to go on more about public schools just because those are the ones that we're most familiar with. If you have any questions so far, you can always, again, use the chat to let me know. Now I want to move on to private high schools. Now, private high schools, they can be, as opposed to public high schools, which again are publicly ran and publicly funded, these private entities can be operated by whether it is a religious institution, a private organization, they can be for profit. So they are privately held, privately run. I feel like that's pretty much common knowledge, as it's in the name. It's private high school. And in average, the national average cost of a private high school across the United States was $15,405 last year, which a lot of parents and a lot of families justify that cost with the lower counselor to student ratio, with the student facilities, with the outside resources. And I'm going to talk more about these resources as I go later on in the presentation. Again, I want to remind you all that just because private high schools have more funding and they have a lower student to faculty ratio and they might have newer facilities, that doesn't mean by default every private high school is better than every public high school. In the same way that a public high school having less resources or a lower student faculty ratio, or sorry, higher student to faculty ratio, doesn't automatically mean that they're all public high schools are worse than all private high schools, okay? Later on at the end of this presentation, I'm going to go over the steps to identify what is the best fit for your student. But it is important to note that statistic-wise, whereas there are around 400 and something students for every counselor in a public high school, in a private high school, there are less students, 250, to every one college counselor, okay? So they usually have a little bit more of an ability to interact with those students and give them the time of day. But again, even with that lower rate, student faculty rate, there is still 250 students for one counselor, which is a lot of students to look out after. All right. There's a longer admissions process for these private high schools. Why? Because they have the ability to set their own standards. They might require, their students to have above a certain GPA coming out of elementary or middle school, or have above a certain, criteria or score on whatever admissions test that they decide to administer, if they choose to do so. So they tend to have a little bit of higher academic standards. They also tend to have modern facilities and equipment. Why? Because since they're privately held, money can continuously come in rather than going through a bureaucratic process that maybe some private public high schools have to go through. And then finally, as I already kind of talked about a little bit, there is a smaller class size at these private high schools, which again, a lot of families use as a reason to justify the cost of $15,000 on average for these private high schools, because their students are getting more face-to-face time with their teachers, with their counselors, and they tend to associate that with higher results or better results, okay? And another thing that I want to briefly touch on that I think it's important for you all to know is that correlation does not necessarily mean causation. So I often get a lot of questions regarding the direct relationship between a private high school and higher standardized testing scores, for example, or going to a private school and getting accepted to more rigorous colleges. And while there might be a relationship there that might make someone assume that a private high school is just automatically better, there are other factors outside of the high school itself that play a part. So if a parent or of a student enrolls them in a private high school and they're paying $15,000 for this school, they might also have the economic means to invest in their children getting, private ACT or SAT classes, tutoring. They might invest in them going towards specific certain extracurricular activities, which might lead to having a more competitive profile. So the fact that a school is private by itself might not necessarily just indicate that a student will do better. It might just be also a collateral benefit of parents who will invest a little bit more in the other activities and the other components of a student's college application. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to let you all know. And the reason why, again, I'm doing these live streams on free on YouTube and Facebook is because there's a way or a means to help you parents out learn this information that sometimes, might not necessarily be readily available at the public high schools, because again, the counselors are overwhelmed with how many students they have to serve or how many parents they have to serve. Okay. Again, I wanted to make that clear distinction. And I see that I have more questions in the chat, and I will get back to the questions, and I will be answering more questions at the end of the presentation, but I just thought I'd let y'all know so that you don't get discouraged. Keep on asking your questions, and when I'm done with this presentation, I will go back to the chat to answer them, okay? The next type of school that I wanted to talk about, that often I get many questions about, that is a charter high school. Now, we already talked about public high schools being publicly funded and, being ran by the local district. We talked about private high schools being, as the name suggests, held by private institutions. It could be religious organizations. And that's how they differ public versus high schools. With charter high schools, there is a little bit of a particular case because, they're independently operated public schools. So they're funded by individuals or organizations. So they have the component of being funded by, organizations or individuals, but they are public schools at its core. Okay. So it's a little bit of a blend between the private component of like who owns it and the way that they are run. Okay. And as opposed to to private schools that have an average $15,000 cost, the cost for a charter school is $0. The student to faculty ratio, they get the benefit that private schools do of having a lower student to faculty ratio, which means more face-to-face time between the counselors and the students. They have open enrollment and they can set their admission standards to be a little bit more selective. They also have different approaches to the way that they teach certain topics or the methodology that they use to teach certain certain subjects. And then finally, they also get the benefit of a smaller class size, not necessarily in the thousands like I was talking about earlier in the presentation when I was talking about public schools. Okay. So charter high schools might be a good option if they are available, to you and to your household. And later on, I'm going to be talking about when to choose one over the other and when would be a better fit to go to a certain school over the other. Okay. And finally, I wanted to talk about magnet high schools. Now, I left this one till the end because that is, as a matter of fact, where me and many of the best college aid counselors, or where I and many of the best college aid counselors went to high school back in the day, to magnet high schools. And pretty much the way that they work is that they're operated by the district or by the state. So they're like public schools in that regard. They offer special curriculum so they can, be very heavy with STEM sort of subjects, performing arts, vocational training. So they do have a little bit more of a wider array of curriculum or courses that they can offer. They do have an admission criteria, whether that is taken as standardized test score, like taken in applicant standardized test scores. They can do lotteries. In the case of the school that I went to, they did a lottery. And if any member of the family got accepted through that lottery, then they were able to attend there, and you didn't have to meet the you had to be within the same school district, but it didn't have to be your neighborhood school, right? It could be, you could have lived like a couple of cities away and you could still go through this magnet school. Okay. So because of that, it started a little bit later in the afternoon. And yeah, in some schools or in some cases, they might do it as a first come, first serve criteria for students coming into these magnet schools. Okay. And they're not necessarily as low, like the class size is not as small as necessarily a private school, but it's also not as large as your traditional public schools that might be in the thousands per class. Okay. And yeah, if it might help you out to know that in my case, in the case of the other best college aid counselors, a magnet high school was exactly what we needed, and it worked out really well for us. But that kind of leads me into the main question of this whole presentation, and what you might have been wondering as I was going through the different types of schools, right? Which one is better? Okay. And I know that many people hate this answer of it depends, but I'm going to go into why it depends and how to know which one will be better for you. Okay. So which one out of the different types of high schools is better for you? Private, public, charter, or magnet? Well, let's take a look back and not think about them in a vacuum. Let's not think about magnet schools as just a school that might accept students from all across the county, which might make it more diverse, or public schools as public schools that are just available to your neighborhood, or private schools are just schools that you have to pay money and they might offer better facilities and a lower student to faculty ratio. Let's put that aside for a second and instead do an exercise in which we think about our own students, right? So you're a parent and you have your son or daughter, and your son or daughter is a golfer, or maybe they are a swimmer, or maybe they are into performing arts. Maybe it is the summer of they're about to finish up 8th grade, and this summer they will be starting high school, or next year they will be starting high school. It is very important to see where your son wants to invest his time and effort, whether this would be an extracurricular activity, whether this will be a subject matter, whether this would be uh, based out of a necessity based on, a disability, or a learning disability, or some other sort of, I don't know, a barrier, or consideration that they must have. So it is important not to think of these schools in a vacuum, but rather think of them in the context of your family. And why do I say this? Well, there are a lot of wonderful private schools that, might have, as I was talking about earlier, very high admission rates, and every year they send students to schools like, Ivy League schools and whatnot. But let's say that those schools, that particular school, private school that you're thinking about, doesn't offer, again, if your son or daughter has a disability, they don't offer specific accommodations for them. Or let's say your student is a competitive swimmer and they don't happen to have a swim team at their school. These are all factors that you're going to want to consider, because despite the school, again, in a vacuum being so great, if they do not match with the expertise or with your son or daughter's potential, and it's not a place where they can hone this potential, then it might not be the best fit. And despite, this school having a great success rate year after year, that success rate might not necessarily translate to your own son or daughter's success. So it's very important to start with your kid, with your student, look at what their extracurriculars, what their needs, what their academic needs might be. Also compare your family's finances and see if it's even a viable option to attend private schools, because in some cases the sacrifice of going to a private school might not necessarily be justified by what they're getting out of it. Whereas, instead of paying $15,000 for a private school so that your son or daughter might be, taking X classes and be part of X team, it might be a better investment to go to a public school. And then, even though the school, I don't know, if they don't have as competitive of I don't know, musical theater program, or a sports program, maybe you can invest, instead of paying those $15,000 that you would have otherwise paid at the private school, you can do an after school program, or a club swimming, or club soccer, or club football. That might be a little bit better. So factors to consider is what your student will do in their extracurriculars with their free time, what your finances look like, and what would be a happy medium, or a happy, interaction, or a compromise between your finances and what's being offered by the high schools. Okay, so it's very important to see and think outside the box if a high school just doesn't have the options for your students. Okay. And then I also wanted to talk in regards to how to select the best high school for your student. It is very important to see where your student can fulfill a lot of the requirements. If you want to think long term and you're starting this process really, really young, let's say your student might be interested in the future in taking advanced placement classes, or might be interested in doing dual enrollment, or might be interested in partaking in the IB curriculum, right? The worst thing that you can do is just go with the flow. And if a neighborhood school is what is, everyone who goes to the same elementary school as your child is going to XYZ high school, that's great and all. But if you don't put in the research, and you don't put in the time to see, well, my son, even though he's just in 8th grade, he's always, said that he wants to be a doctor and he's really set on it, but I want to give him options. So maybe, my son or daughter might want to take AP chemistry, or might want to be in a curriculum in which they can take, more STEM related courses. It's important to know about these things so that you just don't go with the flow and go to the neighborhood school and realize that they don't offer any sort of advanced credit that might offset the cost of going to college, because they took an AP credit in high school that counted towards some of their credits that they had to partake in college. Okay, so it's important to not be reactive, but rather be proactive when researching every single one of the options. And I know I said this at the beginning of the presentation, but I want to reiterate the fact that you should not base whether or not a school is a good school or a bad school because it has public, private, magnet, or charter attached to its name, but rather you should base it on what they offer and how it matches and how it complements what your student wants out of their high school career and out of their 4-year experience to be, so that they can build and hone in those particular set of skills, so that when it comes time to apply to college, they have under their belt years of experience in whether it would be, I don't know, key club, NHS, environmental club, whatever it is that might relate one day to what they will be applying to college for. Hopefully you set them up for success so that as with teacher members inside Best College Aid, they can display leadership and duration for as long as possible throughout their high school careers, okay? That leads me into the end of the presentation. Those are all the slides that I have, but now I'm going to move on to the Q&A session of this live streams. Again, if it's your first time here, at the end of every live stream, I go back on the chat and I do a frequently asked question or a live Q&A session. And today I'll go ahead and do so right now. But before I get there, I do want to let you all know that during the holiday season, we are having a 60% off sale. And pretty much the way that this is going to work is if you, let's say you have been watching for the past 36 minutes and you enjoyed my presentation and you're getting a lot of value and you want to learn more about how to help your student, and maybe you're not interested in learning more about high schools, private versus charter versus public, because let's say I did a great job explaining everything to you and you don't have any questions about that, but you're curious about, I don't know, SATs or ACTs or how to help your students with their extracurriculars or how to craft the perfect college application. Well, the way that this is all going to work out and come together is in the link in my bio, or not link in bio, below this video. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can click below this video. In the video description, there's a link to a free presentation on the 6 steps to go to college with scholarships. And that is a presentation that, in a more bird's eye view and a little bit of a step back, goes through every single one of the components of the college application process and how you as a parent can help your student be best prepared for this process. So if you watch that presentation till the end, you're going to be able to click on a 60% off discount if you're interested in, after watching this live stream, after watching that free presentation, if you're interested in joining the thousands of members who are part of Best College Aid, who are teaching their students how to get accepted to college, and who year after year send us success stories of financial aid award packages of tens of thousands of dollars at schools like UPenn, like Northeastern, Northwestern. We have students that have gone to Stanford, that have gone to Harvard, that have gone to the big name schools, but also that have gone to local, state schools, that have gone to smaller private institutions that are more specific to what they want to study. And they do so with excellent financial aid award packages and scholarship packages. So if you're interested, again, in learning more beyond these free live streams that I do and beyond the free presentation that you can access on the link below this video, then there will be a 60% off discount for you to join because of the holidays. And again, I always like to think about things in terms of cost benefit. And given that the cost to join is literally one click and watching a free presentation, and the benefit could be just learning a bunch of things that you didn't know before that can help your student, that could, get them accepted to a school that they would have otherwise not been able to get into. Well, it's a no-brainer to just click on it and get a free presentation out of it. And if you're interested in joining, there's also a 14-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. So really, there's no risk, and potentially you can join, again, the thousands of families that have had a lot of success with our program. So I did want to let you all know before I went into the Q&A session of this presentation that if you're interested in watching that free presentation, all you have to do, and let me show you, all you have to do is, you are watching right now on YouTube, and this is me. This is live stream. This is the way that I am sharing my screen and the way that your screen looks if you're watching on YouTube. Well, let's say that you're watching and you're up to date. you come down here to the video description and you see that there's a link here for the free training. You click on it, and once it's open, you're going to get a pop-up window. If it doesn't come out, you can just click on yes, please save my seat. And that's how you register for the free training on 6 steps to go to college with scholarships. Again, there's really no risk here, and potentially lots of rewards for you to learn a bunch of new things to help your students. Again, I just wanted to share that with you all because we are having that special 60% off holiday sale. All right. But enough about that. I am done talking about the holiday sale of 60% off. If you click the link below this video, I now want to go into the Q&A portion of this live streams. And again, if you've watched before, you know that I do this at the end of every live stream. So let's get started. So first, Dan Schrader is asking, do colleges look at the type of high school you attended or just the grades and activities? Excellent question. Yes, Dan. So there might be some colleges or admissions officers that know, whether or not the school that you went to was public, private, charter, magnet, and they might be familiar with the area because college admissions representatives cover specific areas. So for one school, an admissions officer might be in charge of the east, of the west, of the northern region. So they might be familiar with the counties and the schools that make up that area that they're in charge of. Nonetheless, the priority is to focus on the transcripts and to see what students or what classes were available to students and what rigor they could have taken. Were the students able to take AP classes? Were they only available to or offered honors classes or IB program? Whether or not a student took advantage of these opportunities is important because it shows, the rigor that they were willing to subject themselves to and how they performed in these classes. And number two, the actual results of these courses and how the student performed in these courses is very, very important. And that is usually why colleges ask for their transcripts as a whole, so that the schools can see what level classes were they taking and how they performed at them. And then they can recalculate their own GPA, or they can use prioritize weighted over unweighted GPA, whatever methodology the school wants to use. But at the end of the day, it is all a matter of striking a good balance between taking rigorous courses and performing well in them. So we always teach our best college age students to go ahead and take rigorous courses and take advanced level classes for the subjects that you know that your student will perform well at, because this will enable them to get the GPA boost of taking a more rigorous course and performing well in it than you would have done if you would have gotten the same A grade in a lower level course, like an honors class or a regular class instead of an AP class. All right. Excellent question. All right. Let's see. Jenna Dean is asking, would it be beneficial to get a tutor for my son? He is in 9th grade and is struggling with math class. With colleges, look at that. Excellent question. So colleges will not be able to tell or will not know if your student had a tutor. They will only be able to see what their transcripts is telling them. If your student is struggling, I would very much advise you to consider the following things. You should consider whether or not your high school or your student school offers courses, remedial courses, tutoring classes, any sort of budding program in which older students get to help younger students with the class that your student is struggling with, because it might be beneficial for them to learn from someone who's already gone through this process. You should also consider, as you very correctly mentioned, a private tutor. If that is something that is affordable by you and that might benefit your student, that could be a good resource. But I would start first at the high school level. I would ask the teacher of your student to list out if they know of any resources that they can partake in so that they can get their grades up, or that they can learn the material, in a supplemental way, whether that is through online videos, whether that is through after school programs. So again, I always would recommend to start at the school level, see what's being available and offered there. And then after that, if your student is still struggling, then certainly a private tutor might be beneficial. Colleges will not necessarily be able to know if your student had a tutor, but it might be reflected, if they don't, in their transcripts or their actual performance in the classes. And that is not something I want to do. You always want to make sure that you put your best foot forward and that you're presenting to college admissions officers the most rigorous classes that your student can take, as long as their grades are not being affected by it. So if the highest, pre-algebra class that your student or algebra class that your student can take is at the honors level, rather than going into AP calculus, then yeah, it might be better to stay at the little bit of a lower level, but get that A rather than taking AP calculus and just getting C's or D's throughout the whole year. Okay. Excellent question, Jenna. Now, please do keep them coming, the questions on YouTube and Facebook. I will be answering them for the next 10 more minutes, but I also had some FAQs, some frequently asked questions that I have gotten over the previous set of presentations that I have done, so I'll be sharing those. Next up, we have Jackie Larson, and Jackie Larson is asking, what is the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile? Perfect. So before I get to the differences, I'm going to talk about how they are similar. So both the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and the CSS profile are forms that entities take. Some are at the federal level. So the free application for federal student aid is at the federal level, and the CSS profile is more at the institutional level. And both of these forms pretty much give, whether it's the school or the federal government, an idea of your family's finances and your family's financial makeup. And then these institutions, again, the government or the institution themselves, can assess the need or the estimated family contribution in the case of the FAFSA that a student is expected to receive from their families, and then in turn, how much money they will need in order to fund their education. So that's how they're both similar. They both inform how your family's finances are doing and how much money is expected to be contributed towards your education. But the way that they are different is that the FAFSA is usually used or assessed by the federal government to give federal financial aid, and you have to be a citizen, resident, or an eligible non-citizen in order to receive these awards and fill out the FAFSA. Whereas with the CSS profile, you might be able to fill it out if you're an international student. And again, it's not required by every school, but rather schools that on top of the FAFSA also require the CSS profile. So think about FAFSA at the federal level and CSS profile at the institutional level, okay? But excellent question. Next question we have is from Patty Henderson. And Patty Henderson is asking, my son is in 10th grade. When should he start studying for the ACT? Excellent question. So usually the ACT and the SAT, by the time your student finishes 11th grade, for some cases, if they're taking advanced level classes by 10th grade, they will have learned everything that they will be assessed on and that they will be quizzed on or questioned about on the SAT and ACT. That's not to say they have to wait until then to start studying. As a matter of fact, the earlier, the better. So to answer your question, your student should start studying right now, if not yesterday. And do know that if they start studying, if you have a student who is younger, like in 9th grade or just starting 10th grade, then a lot of the material that they might be studying in, whether it's practice books or whether it's practice tests or old versions of the exam, they might not have yet covered that material. But it's still important to start studying to know what you don't know and start learning it as early as possible. And just as a heads up, if you're one of the Best College 8 members who is watching this right now, do know that the Best College 8 membership comes with free study resources for both the SAT and the ACT. As a matter of fact, we have a partnership with Kaplan so that we can gift all of our students access to the Kaplan Test Prep Plus program. So if you are already a member of Best College 8, you can email me and I will activate your study account for the ACT if you just let me know, okay? That's just a little interjection for our members who are tuned in for this presentation, that all that is covered in your Best College 8 membership, okay? And as a matter of fact, before I go on with the last 3 questions, I do want to share, if you're just joining now, that if you want to join the Best College 8 program, go ahead and check that special holiday sale we're having. You can go to the link in bio, and that link in bio will take you to the free presentation on the 6 steps to go to college with scholarships. And at the end of the presentation is where we give out the coupon code and where you can, exercise or claim the offer for the 60% off for the holiday sale, okay? But back to the questions. Next question that I got is from Olivia Christie. And Olivia Christie is, when should I start? Sorry, I can't see. When should I start taking my kids on college visits? I have my twins in 9th grade. Excellent question. I always think that, or we always advise our students that around 11th grade is usually when most students start going on college visits. If you start earlier, it's definitely not going to hurt you. The reason why college visits are important is because some schools consider their demonstrated interest, or their applicants' demonstrated interest, as one of the factors that determine, the overall score or the strength of the application of the student. So there are many benefits to a college visit. There is the benefit of how much money they, I'm sorry, of how enticing or how committed a student is to a college. And then there's also the added benefit of a student being able to see, oh, well, I like this school, I don't like this school, there's a good option for me, there's not a good option for me. So the benefits are for both sides. Again, the student might get the benefit of seeing whether or not a school is a good fit, but also they get the benefit if it is somewhere that they would like to be. They get to see or show a demonstrated interest that could act in their favor whenever the college admissions officers are reviewing their applications. Excellent question. All right. And then the final question that I have gotten in the chat that I want to go over with you all today. And this question is from Nicole Galloway. Okay. So Nicole Galloway is asking, are colleges impressed by part-time jobs? My daughter works at Chipotle after school. Excellent question. Are colleges impressed, or do they consider part-time jobs whenever evaluating an applicant? The answer to that is yes. This is very beneficial for your student in multiple dimensions. Dimension number one is it's considered an extracurricular activity. And when we look at extracurricular and the components that we've talked about that colleges evaluate for extracurricular activities, they look at leadership and duration. Leadership and duration, again, we talk more about in the free presentation in the link in bio, but pretty much what you need to know is that the concept of leadership is how much of an impact is a student doing in an organization, or do they have a title within that organization? And although that might be most applicable to clubs, if your student has a part-time job, the impact that they're making through their organization might be one of helping out the household, their own household, or they might be able to sustain their own costs of living, paying for their own gas, their own car, their own personal expenses. And all those things are demonstrative of discipline, of being responsible, of finishing what you started if you have had the job for a long time, which leads me to the second component of an extracurricular activity, which is duration. The longer a student performs a specific activity, the more impressive it will be for college admissions officers. So having a job as small as it is, it could be lifeguarding, it could be, as you said, working at a fast food restaurant, whatever the case might be. Yes, it's something that you can include that your students should include in the college application. Demonstrates a lot of discipline, responsibility, and yeah, certainly something that your students should continue to do if possible. And then if they can go into college, another thing that we teach our best college aid members is how to get work-study positions so that while they're still in college, they can pay and finance their own education so that they don't have to take out loans and that they don't accrue interest, and that this can all, again, benefit their overall 4-year experience at the lowest of costs. So that's something we teach our members, but that's a whole other can of worms that we can open if somebody has a question about that. Or if you have any other questions. I don't see any more questions in the chats, but if you happen to have any other question, or if you enjoyed the last 54 minutes of me giving out this presentation and then the subsequent Q&A session, then feel absolutely free to check out the link in bio, the link in the in the description below this video. Why? Because that's a free presentation on the 6 steps to go to college with scholarships. And on top of getting a free presentation out of that, you also could potentially have access, if you're interested in joining Best College Aid, to 60% of our full paid program. And that is a great deal in terms of cost benefit, because not only would you get a free training if you click the link in bio, you get the offer for the 60% off. We do have a 14-day money back guarantee for you to try Best College Aid, join Best College Aid. We are very happy because our satisfaction rate is above 98%. So less than 2% of people who join, exercise this 2-week money back guarantee. Obviously, we honor it if you are one of those less than 2%. It's just there as a backup, but the majority of people are very, very satisfied. We have thousands of members, and it is something that you can check out again after watching the free presentation that is in the link below this video. That was all for today's presentation. I don't see any more questions. I got through all the slides. I do want to remind you all that I will be back here again tomorrow at 3 p.m. on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to follow us on all of our social media platforms, remember that our handle is at Best College Aid USA across the board on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. All right, that's all I had for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. And if you're joining on Instagram and TikTok, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a blessed rest of your day. Bye-bye, y'all.